At this time, we ask that you kindly take your seat as we prepare to begin our program. At this time, please silence your phone, take your seats, and ensure that any electronic devices are off. This way we can give our full attention to the evening ahead. Please join us in welcoming to the stage Jesse Kornberg, President and CEO of the Skirball Cultural Center.
Good evening. Welcome. We are thrilled to have you with us tonight. For those of you who haven't been to the Skirball before, this is the place where all of LA comes to share in Jewish culture and Jewish values. And I believe that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. It is. It's a wonderful thing to do. Why is it Jewish to be here for this conversation? You all showed up because it's Jewish to vote. It's Jewish to care. It's Jewish to care how the vote affects not just you, but our whole community. And it is Jewish to show up for our community and for one another. You have demonstrated that in spades tonight. And if the goal of this evening's gathering was to impress upon these candidates how important it is to take your concerns into consideration, I believe you have already accomplished that goal just by showing these numbers together in this way. But that's not all that is Jewish to do. It must be at least as Jewish to disagree. I am excited for a spirited debate, to really hear difference of opinion. And in that moment, when you hear something with which you disagree, I know that we will demonstrate that most essential of all the Jewish acts, the act of listening. With that, I thank you again for coming and demonstrating the strength, resolve, and hope of our community. I look forward to the conversation and to seeing you back here again at the Skirball soon for so much more. Enjoy.
And now, let's extend a warm welcome to Ty Gregory, CEO of the JCRC Bay Area, David Bacarsley, Executive Director for Jewish California, and Noah Farkas, President and CEO of Jewish Federation, Los Angeles.
Good evening. Let's try that again. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Jewish California 2026 Governor Forum. Thank you all so much for joining us. My friends, California for many generations has been one of the best places in the world to be Jewish, a lighthouse for our community, thanks to its steadfast commitments to civil rights and its incredible diversity. Our state's innovative spirit from Silicon Valley to Hollywood and far beyond, has enabled so many Jewish immigrants and families to thrive here. As our audience of nearly 1,500 and many, many more watching online, hello everybody, as we all recognize, Jewish Californians believe that we are now at a crossroads. Rising anti-Semitism across many elements of public life, from our streets to our classrooms, from our city halls to our politics, left and right, across social media platforms and beyond, are leading many of us to question our long-standing sense of belonging that has defined generations of experience of California Jews. We are 1.2 million strong when we are united. But we are at the same time a small 3% minority of the population of this state. We will not overcome the headwinds that we face as a community if we face them divided or face them alone. It is only by forging trusted relationships across diverse communities and with our elected leaders like we're doing tonight that we will succeed in ensuring our Jewish future in the state of California.
The governor of California leads the fourth largest economy in the world and has a public platform whose national influence is arguably second only to the President of the United States. As they say, as goes California, so goes the nation. The next governor will therefore play a significant role in shaping the Jewish future, not only for our families, communities, and state, but for the entire country. In recent years, Governor Newsom championed many of our top priorities, from signing AB 715, our landmark law addressing anti-Semitism in schools, to funding nonprofit security grants and critical social services, and to developing the nation's first statewide anti-Semitism action plan. As our needs continue to grow in this challenging climate, we will look to the next governor to strengthen understanding of Jewish identity in schools, ensure the safety of our communities, build on the California-Israel relationship, and advance our Jewish values of uplifting all Californians. To that end, I am honored to share publicly for the first time that our organization, formerly known as JPAC, will now go by a new name, Jewish California. Yeah. As the nation's largest statewide coalition of Jewish organizations, representing over 40 diverse institutions across our state, Jewish California is charting a bold future for our community by uplifting our voice in Sacramento. Thanks.
Which of course brings us to tonight. On this evening, you'll hear from the leading candidates seeking to serve as our next governor. Each of them brings a distinct vision, set of experiences, and leadership style to this role. Our organizations, Jewish Federation Los Angeles, JFED LA, Jewish California, JCRC Bay Area, and the Skirball Center came together to organize this forum, recognizing with the stakes today that we need our own space to put the candidates on the record about the pressing issues facing our community. And now it's my duty to do the most Jewish thing in the room, which is to thank our event co-sponsors, the American Jewish Committee, the Anti-Defamation League, go ahead and clap, Jewish Federation Bay Area, Jewish Family and Children's Service of San Francisco, the Israeli American Council, California Jewish Democrats, Jewish Silicon Valley, Jewish Federation and JCRC of the Sacramento region, Stand With Us, Jewish Community Action Network of Orange County, the Russian-speaking Jewish community of San Francisco Bay Area, and all those others for helping to make our tonight possible. Please thank them for their generous sponsorship. And just on that note, this is the first time that this number of organizations in the Jewish community has come together. And if we take away anything from tonight, and I hope the candidates take this away, the Jewish community is more united than we have ever been in the state of California, and that is because of the work of these organizations. To our attendees and everyone watching, Jewish vote in our 2026 elections has never been more important. We urge you to educate your friends and families about what you hear from candidates tonight. Please also consider engaging with a campaign of your choosing. Volunteer, donate, get involved. And then join all of us in Sacramento on May 11th and 12th for the Jewish California Capital Summit to raise our collective voices. Civic engagement is a cornerstone of our organization's work, and as we as professionals can't do it alone, and it is the cornerstone of a vibrant democracy. So please join us in May 11th and 12th and just get engaged as quickly as you can. And to the candidates joining us this evening, thank you. Thank you for taking the time on the campaign trail to engage with and address our community. We stand to serve as your partners in building a stronger, more just state of California where all communities can thrive. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, my dear friend and colleague, chair of the Legislative Jewish Caucus. Jesse.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi Farkas, and thank you to the extraordinary leaders and organizations who have brought us together this evening. As was mentioned, my name is Jesse Gabriel. I am proud and honored to chair the California Legislative Jewish Caucus. And for those who may be unfamiliar, our caucus is 18 members strong and united in serving as a voice for California's Jewish community in our state capital. In recent years, our members have proudly authored legislation to combat anti-Semitism, strengthen Holocaust education, enhance community security, protect Jewish students, and secure hundreds of millions of dollars for Jewish community priorities. Guided by Jewish values and Jewish tradition, we have also fought to uplift the most vulnerable, to protect civil rights, to stand in solidarity with immigrants and other communities facing hate, and to advance opportunity for Californians of every faith and background. Thank you. And we have done this work in deep partnership with the organizations that are here this evening, with our dear colleagues and allies in the other diversity caucuses, and with Governor Newsom and his administration. Those of us in Sacramento have witnessed it firsthand. Governor Newsom has stood with our community and our caucus in moments of celebration and in moments of crisis, in public and in private, in word and in deed. And we are hopeful and excited to build that same partnership with our next governor. So let me thank each of the candidates for being here tonight. It matters that you showed up, and it matters that you are here to listen and engage with our community. Our caucus is engaged, our community is energized, and we are ready not only for tonight's conversation, but for the partnership and leadership that California needs in the years ahead. So we wish you all the best of luck, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
And now, for the conversation we've all gathered for, please welcome onto the stage tonight's moderator, Alex Cohen, Emmy Award-winning journalist with Spectrum News, and the 2026 California gubernatorial candidates.
Good evening, everybody. How is everyone? Good. Welcome to our live audience here at the Skirball and to those viewers tuning in virtually. I'm Alex Cohen, and I thank you for joining the Jewish California 2026 Governor Candidate Forum. It's such an honor to moderate tonight's conversation and to hear directly from these candidates to gain a much deeper understanding of their specific priorities and their visions for our state's future. While we will be exploring an array of issues shaping this critical race tonight, our discussion will be primarily guided by the perspective and the priorities of California's Jewish community and the values which shape it. There are, as you know, many candidates vying for this powerful seat, and the ones on tonight's stage did meet nonpartisan, objective qualifying criteria based on demonstrated statewide viability. This criteria includes top polling results in a recent reputable, nonpartisan, and independent poll, and/or at least $1 million raised since July 1st. Of the 8 candidates now running who meet that criteria, it is my pleasure to introduce the ones with us tonight. I will do so in alphabetical order, and I will ask that everyone hold your applause until the very end. Republican and businessman and policy expert Steve Hilton, and our 4 Democrats with us tonight, wait till the end, please. San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan, entrepreneur and activist Tom Steyer, Congressmember Eric Swalwell, and former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. And now you may clap. I also want to note that there were other candidates who qualified and were invited, and those candidates include former U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Javier Becerra, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, and former Congressmember Katie Porter. I know we're all waiting for the fun discussion part, but we've got a few rules to go over. Our goal this evening is to foster a thoughtful, substantive, and respectful exchange of ideas, and to that end, we ask that everyone maintain respectful decorum. Jesse asked nicely. Now I'll be the bad cop and say that any audience disruption of any kind will not be tolerated and may well result in removal from this venue. For most of the questions this evening, our candidates will have 90 seconds each to respond, and I will specify if we ask for shorter answers overall. What you may not see is that here at the bottom of our stage is a timer that's visible to all of our candidates. It will indicate to them what your remaining time is. If you go beyond that time, we do have the capability to mute your microphone. Enough said. To ensure balance, we will be rotating the order of our responses, with each candidate beginning the answer to at least one of our questions this evening, and if necessary, brief follow-up questions may be asked. While answers really should, candidates, focus on your own policy, your own vision, if somebody on this stage chooses to invoke the name of another candidate in a less than pleasant manner, that candidate may be given up to 30 seconds to respond at my discretion. With that, we will begin with opening remarks, no more than 1 minute, and I'm going to have a technical issue. I'm seeing it set for 1:30, so if we can make sure it's set perfect. And we will begin this evening with Steve Hilton.
Thank you very much. What a great honor to be here. I want to start with hockey. My parents are Hungarian, and my dad was the goalie for the Hungarian national hockey team. Now, he didn't get a Presidential Medal of Freedom like our great American hero did this week, but the first Olympics he played in was the 1936 Olympics in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, the Hitler Olympics. And when I was a little boy, I remember him telling me that he had to change his name on the team sheet because it sounded too Jewish. And look where we are today in California. Kids in our schools having to hide their identity for fear. This is not acceptable to me. But here's the hope. And I go back to a conversation I had nearly 25 years ago with Shimon Peres in Jerusalem. And he said, Steve, the way we defeat hate is to build frameworks for building together, where people can be together in business, art, culture, sport.
And
that is the spirit in which I want to lead this great state and make it golden again.
Mayor. 1 minute.
Good evening, Erev Tov. It's great to be here with all of you this evening. I want to thank Jewish California, JCRC, and Jewish Federation of LA, and all of the other partners listed up above for bringing us together. And thank you to all of you, Jewish community members from across the state, for being here for this important conversation. I also want to thank my campaign team, most of whom are here this evening. While I am Catholic, we are just a few people short of a minion on this campaign. And I'm very, very proud of the work we're doing together. Look, it is sad for me, and I am sure even more devastating for you, that so much of our conversation tonight has to be about how we keep the Jewish community safe. I don't want our Jewish community to just be safe or just be tolerated. I want you to be celebrated for the deep civic, cultural, economic contributions you make to this state every day. And as governor, I will be your biggest ally. Thank you.
Mr. Steyer.
Hi, I'm Tom Steyer. I want to say this place is amazing. I really have not been here before, and I'd also say this is a gigantic audience. So people in this community are really switched on to politics. Thank you for coming tonight. You should know that when I was running the governor's task force on economic recovery and business recovery, the first thing I did was set up a racial equity commission, because California is about diversity, it's about celebrating our diversity, and this is a crucial element of what I want in this state. The second thing you should know is that my father, as a naval officer in World War II, was the assistant to the chief prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials of the Nazis. So if you're wondering how deeply I care about diversity, about the Jewish community specifically, knowing where this can go, knowing the increasing number of events, stop wondering. I understand where this can go, and I couldn't possibly take it more seriously.
Thank you. Representative Swalwell.
In our great state, people are scared and prices are high. And the next governor has two jobs: to be a fighter protector for all Californians and to bring a new California you can afford, one that has economic growth and modernizing the way we deliver services. On the first part, I've been a fighter protector my whole life. I was raised by a cop. My brothers are cops. I worked as a prosecutor in Oakland. I led the hate crimes unit. In Congress, I've been a part of every major investigation and 2 impeachments. If anyone wants to go after our Jewish community, they're going to have to go through me. I know the anxiety that you live in right now, the fear you have for your kids. And I promise, before we get to a new California, the first job that I have is to make sure that you are safe in how you worship and safe in how your kids live. Thank you.
Mayor Villaraigosa.
Well, it's good to be home. I grew up in Boyle Heights. I grew up with Jews, Mexicans, and Japanese Americans. I didn't know back then why we all lived together in the Ellis Island of LA. We lived together because there were covenants with the land that wouldn't allow us to buy homes or rent in a big part of the city. Ever since I was a kid, I went to brisses, I went to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. I stood up with this community and understood early on about what the Holocaust did to so many of your family members. And I'll tell you something, I have stood with this community my entire life. I have stood against racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia my entire life because of the learning and education I got back in Boyle Heights.
Thank you very much. For our first question this evening, you'll each have 90 seconds, and we will start with you, Mayor Mahan. And here's the question. Jewish tradition emphasizes welcoming the stranger. And we know that immigration enforcement is a key priority of the current federal administration. California was one of the first states in the nation to experience and witness enforcement operations. In your opinion, what role should the state play when it comes to engaging with the federal government on immigration? 90 seconds to you, Mayor Mahan.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank the various Jewish organizations in the state who have stood up in solidarity and used legal tools and made the case to the broader community that we need to stand up for civil rights, because I think this community understands maybe better than most what happens when we start to dehumanize and otherize people in the community who are vulnerable, who maybe don't look like us, talk like us. This is a very dangerous, very slippery slope that we are on. We need to remember the fundamental human dignity of everyone in our community. As mayor in San Jose, we have engaged in multiple lawsuits against this administration to ensure that people's civil liberties are protected. We have issued a ban on the federal government commandeering city facilities for purposes other than what our taxpayers are paying for them to be used. And look, reasonable people can have conversations about secure borders and whether or not we should have pathways to citizenship, but what is being done is instilling fear, it's dividing communities, it's eroding our most sacred institutions. And our governor must be clear about that and use the law, use our budget, and use the bully pulpit to push back on that abuse of power and make clear what our values are as Californians and as Americans and protect our Constitution. We are all affected when we begin to see these kinds of actions push people to the margins, divide our community, and create fear.
Thank you. Mr. Steyer.
So I want to start by saying this state, this country has been built by immigrants. Everyone in this room, as far as I know, is an immigrant or the descendant of immigrants, and we need immigrants in this state and should welcome them. They are Californians. And if you look at what we've done, my wife and I have supported the largest immigrant service organization in California called Good Samaritan for 40 years with ever asking someone for their papers and providing a lot of services to that community, which I could go into. We also went down to the border when they were separating children from their parents in the Trump 1 to see what we could do, to keep those families together and protect the kids. We also started a fund to hire lawyers and put in over $3 million because we knew that when people who are under threat of deportation have a lawyer, they have a much better chance. And our organization in Sacramento pushed really hard to make this a sanctuary state. Look, ICE is a criminal organization. We should abolish ICE. You cannot reform ICE. But I think the basic point, and I think there are a lot of people on this stage who agree with this, and I'm sure there are a lot of people, this is going to be a very contentious time for us, and this president is going to come for us, and he's going to come for us specifically about immigration and try and use immigrations as a wedge to go after this community, and it's going to be rough. You are going to need a strong governor who's going to understand what's going on and be willing to take the risks and explain that we're a better community who stands for better things, and that's what Americans should support.
The next governor of California has to build a firewall between President Trump, his ICE agents, and all Californians. For 14 years, I have represented a community where 40% of my constituents were born outside of the United States. I see the value of immigration and diversity, and they have trusted me to be their fighter and protector. I am in the arena right now. I have voted against ICE funding. They need to be stripped down from the root to the stem. I have legislation that would take away their qualified immunity. They think they're invincible. They're not. And I've said as governor, to protect all Californians, I will use emergency powers and tell ICE, if you refuse to take off your mask, you'll lose your driver's license. If you've worked for ICE, forget about ever working in the 250,000 jobs we have in the United States. And if you harm a single Californian, you better hire the best lawyer you can afford. I know this president. He only understands one language. It's the language of strength. And I will go on offense every single day because I know what it means for the people who will be on defense, the most vulnerable in our community, if I don't do that.
As some of you know, Angelinos anyways, I came out of the civil rights movement. It was that experience growing up in Boyle Heights that taught me I have to stand up. I was a labor leader after that, president of the ACLU. Never in my life have I seen federal agents covered from head to toe, like the Ku Klux Klan, unidentified, with flashbang grenades and assault weapons. This is un-American. Everybody here agrees we have a right to secure our borders. Every nation does. And he said he was going after violent criminals and serious felons. We're fine with that. Tearing children from their parents, going after people in hospitals and schools and courthouses is unacceptable. I have a plan. The state can, as an example, and I will, with an executive directive, say that we have a right to police those detention centers, to make sure that health and safety is occurring, that kids are eating We have a right to say in the United States of America, you can't go into a place of business or a home without a warrant. We can do all of that. We have to stand up for California values, and I will, as your next governor.
Mr. Hilton.
So I think I'm the only one on the stage who actually is an immigrant. Perhaps you can tell by the accent. I'm working on that, don't worry. Look, my parents were immigrants, refugees from communism, as I mentioned. I grew up in a working class immigrant household. I deeply understand what that means and what that represents and how that is such an important part of our story here in California. But as we talk about some of the other subjects this evening, we're going to be talking a lot about enforcing the law. And I think it's very important that we understand that we can't pick and choose which ones we want to enforce. And I've made it clear that we need to enforce all our laws peacefully and calmly, and above all in this issue. I think it's incredibly important that we lower the temperature. Nobody wants to see scenes, the horrific scenes that we saw in Minneapolis, happen here. At all costs, we must avoid that. And I will work incredibly hard to make sure that when I'm governor, all laws, federal, state, local, are peacefully enforced.
For our next question, we will once again have 90 seconds, and this time we'll be starting with Tom Steyer. Supporting immigrants, children, those living with disabilities, fighting hunger and poverty, protecting victims of violence. Many Jewish social service organizations across the state do this work daily, but it is not easy. They are now preparing for potential cuts from the federal government and potential multi-year deficits here in California in the billions. If elected, which social services would you prioritize, and which would you cut or eliminate, and why? Mr. Steyer.
So forgive me for messing up the Hebrew. Tikkun Olam?
Tikkun Olam.
Tikkun Olam. Thank you. Is about making the community better, providing care, caring about other people, making the world better. In California, we have an issue with that, and the issue is money. We have a very, very stretched budget, and the president's bill is going to kick 1 to 3 million people off Medi-Cal, and each one of those people still needs care, and it's going to cost us $10,000 bucks. I think I'm the only person who's talking about how we're going to meet that in the short run. I've been saying we need to close a real estate tax loophole that will bring in $22 billion a year that is absolutely critical for every single one of the ones that Alex is asking. Because if you understand how the budget works in Sacramento, it is a trade-off, and they're all worthwhile. So that's the first thing. I am going to bring this money. The second question is this: why is this happening? And the answer is healthcare is eating us. The cost of healthcare is going up and escalating and is eating every family in this state. It is eating every business in this state. It is eating every nonprofit and the government. And that's why I'm for single-payer healthcare. Because if we're going to actually meet Tikkun Olam, did I get it? Which we need to, and which my campaign is all about, then we need to structurally change and do single-payer so we can meet the needs of Californians.
I want to tell you my top 3 priorities as governor: revenue, revenue, and revenue. Making sure that Californians have access to affordable, high-quality health care requires new revenue. Making sure that our kids have the best education and teachers who can get them into the new economies means we need new revenue. And making sure that we protect the public. Upholding our public safety obligation means we need new revenue. And by the way, there are still thousands of Holocaust survivors in California, many of them living in poverty. And that is a shame. And we must fund health care. That's about $14 million to give them health care. My revenue plan says this: if you're a corporation in California and you have the longest distance between what the CEO and the C-suite make and what the heart and soul of the company makes, you're going to pay more in taxes. If you want to lift wages take people off Medi-Cal, take them off state assistance, I'm actually gonna lower your taxes. The bet on that is a $7 to $8 million in new revenue coming to California to help me pay down our costs. I'm also going to ask many of you to be global ambassadors, to go to capital markets across the world, seek capital into California companies, deploy the capital there, take the management fees and some of the equity that we take in those companies and put those into healthcare, education, and public safety. Revenue, revenue, revenue. That's my top 3 priorities to meet those obligations.
Again, because of how I grew up, I too believe in tikkun olam, mitzvah, tzedakah, and in my own religion, social justice. The government has to be for the least among us. And many of the nonprofits that you speak to are those agencies working with people that don't have health care, that maybe are immigrants and are trying to become legal, working at health care, whatever it is. And the next governor is going to have to prioritize that. But let's be honest. We're looking next year at somewhere between $18 and $30 billion deficit. The next governor is going to have to say to the people of the state, we're going to live within our means, the way Jerry Brown did, who left us a $300 million surplus. We're going to prioritize, and yes, we should prioritize that safety net. But we can't just cut our way out of this mess. We're going to have to grow our economy. This is the toughest state for small business in the United States of America. Many of you are in small business or bigger businesses. This is the toughest state. We're going to have to unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of California, the innovative economy, tech, AI, biomed, and small business. The next governor is going to have to do that so we have the revenue that we just heard about. That's the only way to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton.
So when we were talking beforehand, and you said, if we say something derogatory about the other candidates, they get a little bit of time to respond. And I said, well, what happens if we praise them? And you said, well, you just move on. So I'm going to do the first bit of that tonight, and I want to praise what Antonio just said, completely agree, and actually I would like to take it further. One of the last, it was the last job, as you heard, most of my career has been in business. I've worked around the world and started my own companies. The last job I did, though, before moving here with my wife and 2 sons in 2012 was to be working in the government in the UK. I was senior advisor to the Prime Minister, to David Cameron, and there I was involved in helping to implement our domestic reform program. And the theme of what I was trying to do was captured in a phrase that was kind of mocked, but it means something. You'll see what I'm getting at. The phrase was, big society, not big government. And what I meant by that was when we want to deliver services, when we want to help people, the way that we best do that is to decentralize power and to give budgets and power to the people and the organizations that do the job best. And that is, so often in this state, Jewish organizations, Jewish social services organizations, and we need to cut out the bureaucracy and the waste in our government. You know, they've doubled the budget of the state of California nearly in the last 5 years. Is everything twice as good? There's a lot of money. We need to cut the bureaucracy, cut the bloat, cut the waste, and put the power where it belongs, especially with so many organizations you represent.
Thank you. This next question will be fielded first by Representative Swalwell. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. Forgive me on that, Mayor.
Glad I got in there, although a lot has been said. Look, I spent time in the private sector building a couple of civic tech startups, and when I hear government talk about raising revenue, I get a little worried because that generally means cost that then gets passed on to all of you. We already are one of the highest taxed states in the country, one of the most progressive tax structures. Spending in the state is up 75% in the last 6 years. I don't know anything that is 75% better. I think it is time for us to demand that our government do better before we ask you for more. And there's a huge opportunity for us to use new technology, artificial intelligence, and harness it for civic and social good by bringing it into government to make us smarter, to make us more efficient, not to displace our workforce, but to train them and teach them how to use these tools to better serve you with the resources that we have. And when it comes to tight budgets, one thing I will promise you is that it won't just be the smallest groups or the communities that are not the best represented in Sacramento whose services get cut. I've seen firsthand the impact Jewish Family Services has in my county. I want organizations that perform, that show up, that deliver results, and that's how we're going to determine where we fund more or less when we have to make tough budget trade-offs going forward.
For our next question, we'll have 90 seconds apiece, starting first with Representative Swalwell. And Mayor, I thank you for teeing it up so lovely, because this is a question about artificial intelligence, which is such a huge industry in this state. $126 billion in venture funding flowing to the Bay Area, and that was last year alone. And yet, organizations such as Jewish Vocational Service and the Anti-Defamation League have cautioned that rapid, unchecked AI-driven change is drastically reshaping the job market. And of course, there are concerns that artificial intelligence is increasingly being used to spread both hate and misinformation. The question is, as governor, what specific workforce training investments and policy actions would you champion to help workers upskill and reskill, particularly in underserved communities, while also ensuring that Californians are prepared to navigate the broader societal impacts of AI? Congressman.
If we get this right, California can be the AI capital of the world, but also protect our children, make sure we enable and support our teachers as they prep them, that we protect intellectual property, and I know that really means something where we are right now, as the TV and film industry is threatened by what AI means and the lack of consent that often occurs to take someone's likeness. Also, we have to do everything to make sure that we strip out and reduce how it can promote and enable bias, particularly in minority communities. I represent one of the highest, most successful tech districts in America. I feel comfortable working with industry to put guardrails in place, also around privacy, but I'm going to approach this first as a parent. I have an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and I'm especially worried about what AI can do to make and take bowling and put it on steroids and subject our kids to the type of abuse that we have never seen. And I think a parent-first approach on AI will serve us all well, because I also have to think about what careers will my kids have to go into, and how are we preparing them to make sure that we're investing in them and that they don't go into a shrinking workforce, but we got it right and they went into an expanding workforce.
This is probably one of the biggest issues in our time. When you see the economic potential, the multiplicity of potential that AI has to our economy and to our society, to the world of work, this is something we need to embrace carefully. One, safety. You said it. I don't have kids that age anymore, but I do have grandkids. And we've seen with tech what happens when the regulatory framework is too light. We all bought into back then that it needed to be light, let it grow. We can't make the same mistakes we made with tech, and particularly social media for our children. That's number one, because as you said, safety, safety, safety. Number two, folks, when you read, I don't care what newspaper or the books that talk about AI today, when you look at the possibility of the job loss that could occur in this country, we all have to say, hold it a minute. I love when they tell me, we'll train them afterwards. They won't get trained afterwards. We've got to make sure that we don't have the kind of displacement that's just susceptible and will create revolutionary times. Make no mistake, if that many people are out of work.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton.
So look, we have to get real about what's happening to our economy here in California. We hear, as we heard earlier, we have the 4th biggest economy in the world, and that's great. It's true statistically. I'm proud of that. I want us to be the 3rd biggest. But at the same time, right now in California, even before the AI revolution destroys jobs or whatever we fear, we have the highest unemployment rate today of all 50 states. We have the highest poverty rate, tied with Louisiana. Why? Because we've had the highest taxes, the worst business climate, as Antonio pointed out. That has to change. But the real story here, in terms of preparing for this AI future, is education. The calamity of what is going on in our public schools in California has to be confronted. We have a situation right now where less than half of the kids in our schools meet basic standards for English, for reading. Less than half. With math, it's a third. That is a total disgrace. It is a total disgrace. How on earth are we going to prepare our kids to face this future if they can't read and they can't do math, if we're being overtaken on all these things by all the red states that people look down their noses at, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, all have overtaken California on educational standards because they've done practical things that work. For example, if you can't read by 3rd grade, you don't go up to 4th grade. We make sure you read before you progress. These are the practical things we need to do to prepare our kids for the future, whatever it brings.
Well, there's plenty that Steve and I don't agree on, but I agree with him on that. And I hope we're going to talk more about public education in this forum here. Let me say, though, I mentioned I spent a little time in the tech world building a couple of startups, but I didn't start there. I grew up in Watsonville, a little farming town on the Central Coast. Best strawberries in the world, by the way. Driscoll berries, Martinelli's apple cider. My dad was a letter carrier. My mom was a teacher. And my path to greater opportunity was education. It was getting those fundamental skills Steve's talking about, literacy and math and learning about the world, learning about history, learning to think critically. And that's the path forward for us when it comes to AI. Yes, we need smart regulation. We must protect our children. I have little kids. I don't want them on social media or playing with AI unless I'm there, it's very contained until they're 16, let's say, or really an age when they've started to be taught critical thinking skills and have a little more perspective. But let me tell you what I've done in San Jose, where I lead the largest city in Northern California, the heart of Silicon Valley. We have built AI upskilling courses for our workforce, for our residents. We got the big tech companies to bring platforms into our library system and make their tools freely available to our residents. We have to invest in our human capital. Yes, it's our public school system, but it's reskilling our workforce. It's making these tools available and harnessing them to make our public services better and make sure people are empowered to use them for the jobs of the future.
Mr. AI gotcha. Mr. Steyer, your thoughts on artificial intelligence?
Actually, I'm going to talk about AI. And let me say, I am an entrepreneur who started in one room with no windows, and I built a business up to $38 billion. So I'm very aware of what it is to be an entrepreneur, and I'm very aware of what it takes and how scary it is. So the idea that we need growth, I know we need growth. The thing you should know is AI is coming. It doesn't matter what we say. This is a worldwide phenomenon. California is about 60% of that worldwide phenomenon. So when we talk about whether California is going to be a leader here, California is a leader here. We are going to be a leader here. The question is how we're going to be a leader here. And when we think about AI, I mean, everyone's talking about kids, just as a statistic so you can get it in your head. A third of the kids would, right now, 16-year-olds, would rather talk to their chat box than they would talk to a human being. So when you think about what happened in social media, this is that on steroids. So protecting kids is, that's table stakes. But the biggest failure of government that I've seen in my lifetime is watching the Midwest get hollowed out. And I don't know how many times you guys have been to those towns, but Detroit, Cleveland, Akron, Gary, those are shells. So when we look forward and we understand this is actually a gigantic threat to working people, we are going to have to be ahead of it. We are going to have to think about connecting them with real jobs and the kind of jobs that will survive no matter what. That is something I will do because I understand that for working people, working isn't just about a wage and benefits. It's about dignity and a meaning in life. And we're going to have to be smart about this and not fit.
For this next question, we'll begin with Mr. Villaraigosa, and we will have 90 seconds on the clock for each of your responses. Hate is on the rise across vulnerable communities in our state, with anti-Semitism at historic levels. As we heard earlier this evening, Jews comprise just 3% of California's population and yet account for 15% of reported hate crimes statewide. This according to the California Department of Justice. If elected governor, what specific initiatives would you champion to ensure the safety of all vulnerable communities, especially Jewish ones?
Well, I think a number of us have said safety first. And I look at everything from the safety lens. When the North Valley Jewish Community Center was attacked and people were shot, I showed up. I showed up every single time there was a major incident against Jews, but not just Jews, against blacks, Latinos, everyone. I was a uniter in this town. And I'll tell you, the next governor's got to stand up to hate. When the ADL did stand up against hate, or Jewish hate, I stood up with them. I stood up today and tweeted about that. I donated to the ADL because I saw that there was a rise in anti-Semitism. I supported AB 715 because I saw that we were teaching kids to discriminate and hate Jews and Israel. I've stood up against that my whole life, and I will as governor. I will stand up and be the uniter. I was in this town. This town doesn't just have 40%. We're 70% of color. We come from every corner of the earth, and I brought us together. And as governor, I will bring us together as well. I will stand up against anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, every kind of hate that exists, because this is a place where we should honor one another and respect one another.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton.
To pick up where you left off, Antonio, I agree. We need to find ways, just as I mentioned earlier, that as Shimon Peres said to me, to have opportunities for people to learn about each other, to diminish the hate, because they're side by side, working together, doing things together. That's all true. But we've got to be strong on this as well. After October the 7th, I went to UCLA with my running mate for Lieutenant Governor, Gloria Romero, and we stood there and we said, this is unacceptable, what is happening here. And these university authorities have to be stronger in the face of the hate that we see. And I think it's completely outrageous. It's outrageous that Barry Weiss has to cancel the Daniel Pearl lecture at UCLA for security reasons. That is completely unacceptable. We have to defend against this stuff strongly. And I gotta tell you, we have to push back against those who are pushing the hate. And they're pushing the hate into our schools through the curriculum. And we have to strongly stand against those like the CTA, I'm afraid I'm going to be very direct about it, who are pushing the kind of hate that is leading to this violence. We have to stand against that. And as governor, I will, stronger than you've ever seen before, because I will not accept this in our state. We've got to get along with each other, and I want to do that in a positive way, but we've got to do it in a strong way as well. And I can promise you that I will.
Guess we'll agree again, Steve. Well done. Doesn't happen at every debate. I'm glad we're aligned on many of these issues. As mayor, when there's hate, discrimination, division in the community, people look to you to show leadership. And every time we've had an act of anti-Semitism, or as Antonio said, act of hate against any community, I show up. The first to denounce it, the first to say we must do better, the first to stand with those who have been victimized. Before I even show up, though, my first call is to our police chief. And in San Jose, we make sure that our officers are there, that they are present. We build relationships ahead of time, and we show strength and unity by being there and standing together and saying, we are better than this. We will not tolerate hate. But as you all have shown through your advocacy, we have to get upstream of it. And it starts in the classroom, that most foundational public institution where we shape the hearts and minds of our young people. And it is completely unacceptable that we have teachers teaching curriculum that just divide children into oppressor and oppressed and say some people's opinions are valid and others are not. This is antithetical to our entire liberal democracy, the Enlightenment, rationalism, everything we stand for and believe in as Americans that's brought people here, and I will stand strong to advocate for better curriculum and
So I want to echo what everyone has said, that it starts with safety, and that safety is obviously starts with physical safety, because it turns out that, somebody went into the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh and killed a whole bunch of people. So it's not just a theoretical thing, it's a real thing that's happening. And I want to also we need to talk about emotional safety, because the damage that is done to especially kids, but absolutely to adults, by hate and by discrimination is really deep, and it's just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't last for a lifetime. It does last for a lifetime. So I'm absolutely strong on that, and I agree that what people are saying is right and smart and important. But I want to talk about something else that's just been traditionally true for the Jewish community, which is this: coalition. When we think about California, it really is diverse. And the Jewish community has been a subject of gigantic amount of discrimination and hate events, and they have to stop. But I also want to say that reaching out to other communities and a broader view of where we're going together is actually the thing that I think will end the whole idea. And I would really want, as governor, to push. Of course we're going to deal with every goddamn incident. Of course we're going to stand up for every kid. But the truth is, let's have a positive way of reaching out for a different vision of what this state stands for. So we're not just dealing with the problems, we're creating the solution in our behavior and our language.
My job is to protect all Californians, and with anti-Semitism on the rise and violence on the rise, that especially includes the Jewish community. The Jewish community in Los Angeles, by the way, is larger than the Jewish community in Jerusalem. This is a large community that is living under fear and anxiety right now. Parents who are making the hard decision to perhaps homeschool their kids because they're afraid of the violence and threats they'll be subjected to. That can't happen on my watch as governor. I'm endorsed, and I'm proud to be endorsed by the California Police Chiefs Association. I will work with them to make sure that we protect the Jewish community. In Congress, I led legislation to increase the nonprofit security grant, as it was being stripped out of the budget to pay for the big, brutal bill. I put an amendment on the floor to put it back in. I understand how important this is. But my job is also to be a collaborator. I was taught the Holocaust in my classroom at a public high school in Dublin, California. And the teacher who taught it to me was a political leader in CTA. I'm willing to bring to the table educators and the community to make sure we get this right for our kids. That's the hard job of a governor, is to collaborate, to protect the public, and make sure that the future are better educated. That's why I'm running for governor, and that's the hard job that I'm ready to do.
Once again, 90 seconds for this question, and we'll be beginning with you, Mr. Hilton. And a number of you alluded to education in your previous answer, and we encourage you to continue on the front, because that's where this question is headed. On October 7th of last year, as we heard earlier this evening, Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 715, which is a bill that's aimed at ensuring safer, more inclusive schools for Jewish students, and all students facing hate or bias. So here's our multi-part question, beginning with you, Mr. Hilton. Do you support this measure? If not, why not? And if so, what specific steps would you take as governor to ensure that AB 715 is effectively implemented and enforced across school districts statewide?
I strongly support it, and I very much want to focus on the enforcement. I mean, that's the point. I think we're very good in this state of passing laws and then not really enforcing them. We have to make sure this actually happens. And if you look at what else is going on in other parts of the landscape with the ethnic studies curriculum, you look at the website of the state of the California Department of Education. I mean, it's just not good enough. We have an attitude, a mindset, and an ideology that's infected so many of our institutions in this state. We've got to root this out. And so it's not good enough to pass the law. We've got to make sure that every appointee on the State Board of Education that the governor puts there signs up to the values and the principles behind that and doesn't work in some way to undermine it. So there's so much more that needs to be done. Passing the law is just the beginning. And so we have to make sure also that throughout education, not just through K through 12, look at our universities, look at the discrimination. I mean, look at what's going on. Just one small example, UCLA Medical School, in terms of admissions. You used to see maybe 20 to 40 Jewish students per class. Now it's 1 or 2. Is that a coincidence? We've got to make sure that every single part of our system roots out the ideology of division and hate and anti-Jewish hate that, of course, that bill appropriately addresses, but the bill is just the starting point.
Thank you.
Well, first, let me take a moment to recognize the leadership of Assembly Members Gabriel and Zuber, who, as you know, drove so much of this work. I saw we had Senator Stern here and other leaders from the community. Thank you, Senator Stern, for your leadership. Passing rules, passing new laws doesn't matter if we don't fully implement and enforce them. As governor, on day one, I will ensure that we have an accelerated plan for fully standing up and staffing this Office of Civil Rights, and particularly work with all of you to make sure we identify the right person to fill that role of the anti-Semitism prevention coordinator, and that they have the resources they need to make sure that every family, every child knows what the law is, every teacher knows what the law is, and we have to work extremely hard to hold all of our school districts accountable for properly training their teachers and ensuring that they are not violating the law. Not dividing, not demonizing our community, not scapegoating our children. And I will be very strong on this, and we will enforce the law.
So the fact that this law had to be written is a very sad fact. And I do applaud the two people who wrote it, and you should know that Rick Zuber has been a friend of mine for an embarrassingly long period of time and has endorsed me, and that Henry Stern has been a friend of mine for a much shorter but still well over 10 years and has also endorsed me. And when we think about the need for this law, I find that in 2026 to be absolutely sad. And it calls for something different to me, because of course I want to enforce this law. This law was necessary because of a series of incidents which were extremely destructive and extremely prejudicial. And I want to say that those incidents were part of a much broader move in our society to divisiveness, to anger, to violence, and to hate. And I want to say, of course, this is the most ancient of hates, the most ancient of prejudice. But our society is better than this, and we are the Rainbow Coalition. And Jewish people are absolutely important and central to that Rainbow Coalition, and always have been. And so I want to say to you, will we enforce that law? Yes. But I want to have a different California where we stand with Jews absolutely arm in arm about a state that celebrates diversity, and loves each other. And I know that sounds corny, but that is actually the way we're going to solve this problem.
The answer is yes. I also recognize that the governor of California has more appointments to boards and commissions than anyone in the world other than the President of the United States. And my job is to make sure that through those appointments, the people who are on my team, working with the legislature, reflect a state that want our children to be educated on Jewish hate that exists, on the Holocaust, and to also be protected. Some of the partners I'm going to work with on this in our state, in your community, Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, who has endorsed my campaign. Also, Senator Adam Schiff, who I've worked with for the last 14 years in Congress. And of course, you all, as partners, as we work to make sure that our children are raised and educated with more awareness, more understanding, and more love for each other than the generation before them. That's my duty first, as I said, as a parent. It's a parent-first approach, but also as a governor whose first job, as I said, is to protect the people, but also through the appointments to boards and commissions that I have, make sure that our values of diversity, safety, and history, God forbid, are always fully executed and implemented.
At JPAC last year in Sacramento, I said I not only support it, if I'm governor, I will enforce it. And I too want to thank Rick Saber, Jesse Gabriel, the Jewish caucus, and all of the folks in the legislature that got behind this. You know, at first when you hear the notion of ethnic studies, and you're someone like me that knows that people like me helped to build this state, that the Chinese helped to build this state, that there were people that built this state that we never read about, their contributions. It sounded great. But as Mahan said, Mayor Mahan said, when you start talking about aggressor and oppressor and basically say that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, I wear this pin because I believe in Israel's right to exist. I wear this pin because I know what from the river to the sea means, everyone. I've stood with this community, and I will stand with this community. You know, one of us said, I think it was Tom, my friend, said, we need to build coalitions. You know, 30 years ago, I was working with a Latino Jewish coalition. I've been to so many of those meetings and events over the years. I understood this community was at the forefront of the civil rights movement, opened up the door to people like me. And people like me need to keep the door open to all of us and the rest of us, and I will as your next governor.
And a quick request to our timekeepers for the sake of keeping us on track to get to all of our questions, and since this topic has been somewhat addressed, let's put 60 seconds on the clock for our next question, for which we will begin with Mayor Mahan. And the question is, California is home to more than 750 post-secondary institutions. Colleges and universities often provide a time for individuals to develop deeply held personal beliefs and opportunities to act upon those beliefs. However, balancing safety and inclusion with free expression and academic integrity has proven a tremendous challenge for many of our campuses. As governor, what specific strategies would you embrace to address anti-Semitism and improve the current climate on campuses, and how would you measure success?
Thank you so much. I mean, first of all, it really starts with the way that we govern our UC, CSU, and community college system. And I was incredibly disappointed to see, I think it was a questionnaire in which the Union for the Faculty at the CSU system called out Jewish California, JPAC, specifically along with tobacco and oil companies as like the three groups that you had to pledge not to get any support from. That tells you how bad it has gotten. As governor, I will actively call that out. One of the most powerful things the governor has is the bully pulpit. And it's important as governor to speak directly to that divisiveness and call it out and explain that it is wrong and that we will not tolerate it in our public institutions. We also have to talk about curriculum. And when we set public curriculum, it needs to be rooted in rational. Oh, wait, I forgot.
It's 60 seconds. My apologies, Mayor, for this a bit shorter time. Mr. Steyer, we'll move to you.
So one of the hallmarks of higher education in the United States of America is freedom to protest. And we all believe in the freedom of protest and the right to speech, to free speech. Freedom to protest, not freedom to discriminate. And when protest moves into discriminating against other students, that's when protest is no longer acceptable. And so I'm not sure, you know, I know I look like I might have been in college in the last few years, but I actually wasn't. I'm not sure how this happened. I really am not. And I'm not sure how the administrators thought that somehow freedom to discriminate was part of the Constitution. It is the opposite of the Constitution. And so when we think about this, I'm a huge believer in letting people air their thoughts, not discriminatory thoughts, not hate speech, and definitely not actions that discriminate against their fellow students. And it's the job of the people running those schools to make sure that never happens.
It's college admission season right now, and California students are finding out where they're going. And I asked a friend last week if his daughter had made a decision yet, and he told me that they were taking schools off the list that she had gotten into because they didn't deem them as safe for her as a Jewish American. That's unacceptable. So a metric of success for me is that Jewish California students feel safe in every California university and college. And yes, California and our colleges have always led some of the best movements in our history. However, that does not give you license to hate, to discriminate, to commit violence. And I actually think, and we can dig into this a little bit deeper, that starts with the student code of conduct. And I want to make sure every student understands before they even go into the college what the standards are, what acceptable behavior is, and what the consequences are if they commit hate.
I wrote 3 letters of recommendations for friends who are Jewish, whose children were going to some of the top schools. And what you just said was repeated each time in all 3 families. I'm a proud graduate of UCLA, but I'll tell you something. I've never been so embarrassed and ashamed about what I saw happen on a UC campus. And as governor, we will not tolerate that. The fact that it took so long to extricate these people that tried to intimidate people and wouldn't allow them to go to class, wear their yarmulke, was absolutely unacceptable. And I'll tell you, as governor, I will make sure the UCs respect every community, and particularly this one who's been the victim of that kind of discrimination in the last few years.
So I don't want to speak for the sake of it. I may not need all the 60 seconds even if we need more time, because I strongly agree, sincerely agree with everything that's been said here. Those scenes, that tentifada, all this stuff, totally unacceptable. That's why I went to UCLA straight afterwards to stand against it. I spent time at Hillel on UCLA, and actually it's still going on. That's what's outrageous. It's still going on, this sense of fear and intimidation. And we've got to take a stronger stance. We really, really do. But while I agree with everything that's been said here, the problem is that in other forums, to different audiences, our elected leaders in this state aren't quite as clear on some of these issues and give succor to the hate and the ideology that's causing this fear among our Jewish population. So I would like them to speak with the same strength and clarity against this ideology everywhere, not just in this audience.
We're on TV, so we are speaking to a broader audience.
All right, for our next question, we will go back to 90 seconds on the clock, and we will begin with Mr. Steyer. Mr. Steyer, Jewish Californians are by no means a homogenous community, and there is a wide spectrum of attitudes and beliefs regarding the actions of the Israeli government in recent years. This state is home to one of the largest Israeli-American populations, and California has deep economic, technological, environmental, and cultural ties with Israel. If elected, how would you approach California's relationship with Israel, and what is your response to pressures to sever that partnership, particularly the boycott, divestment, and sanction, otherwise known as BDS movement?
So, of course, California's Jewish community is very diverse, and people don't have the same opinions about anything. That's part of, as the people said before the program started, that's part of being Jewish, is disagreeing. And in particular, Jewish Americans in California don't agree about the Netanyahu administration and what's been going on there. And the people in Israel don't agree about what's going on with the Netanyahu administration and what's going on there. So I also happen to live in a country where the administration of this country I don't agree with. It's like I'm a million miles away from them. So when you talk about California and Israel, or you talk about a relationship with a country, my question is, who are you talking about? Are we talking about the people of Israel, or are we talking about the administration that runs the state of Israel? Because as far as I can tell, Mr. Netanyahu is quite a close confidant, ally, and co-believer with our president. And there's nothing about our president, literally, that I agree with. So, having said that, how do I feel about the people of Israel, a scrappy group of people trying to build a country, build their families, build businesses? That's a completely different question. That is the administration I have a lot of problems with, and we can argue about it, but the truth is, the people of Israel.
All right, comes up there. Representative Swalwell.
The Jewish people of California are not the Israeli government any more than you are, most of you, are a part of the White House or support the White House. And that's how I'm going to approach this as governor of California. I've been to Israel half a dozen times. I've been all over the region. I've seen the innovation in energy. I've seen the innovation in water technology. And of course, California should partner with Israel to meet our own energy and water needs. But I want to tell you about when I took my dad to Israel. It's the first time he'd ever left the United States. And we met President Shimon Peres. And President Peres was talking about how they had worked to include women in all aspects of society, culture, elected office, and how they wanted to model that for the rest of the world. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, a society that doesn't value women will only be and always be half of a society. So I will bring back as many values and technologies from Israel that can help Californians. That's the job of the next governor.
In 1997, I led a delegation of legislators with the Jewish Federation for the 50th anniversary of the founding of Israel. In 2000, I went with the ADL to look at the integration of immigrants, Ethiopian immigrants and Russian immigrants, into Israeli society. As mayor, I led a delegation of legislators to Israel to look at security arrangements around airports and the like. I've been to Israel half a dozen times, including the last time 3 years ago when I wasn't in office anymore. As governor of this state, I will work with the state of Israel. Like Tom and others said, I'm no Netanyahu fan. I know him well. I've met him probably a dozen times. I've spent time with him. I don't agree with him. I don't agree with his government, but I respect the Israeli people. I don't agree with my own government, but I'm a proud American. And so I intend to work with Israel around water and science and tech. These are all things that we can benefit from one another. Nothing like dialogue helps bring better understanding to all of us. I also believe, by the way, in a Palestinian homeland, in a two-state solution. But I believe in Israel's right to exist, and I will lead delegations of trade and commerce with her.
So let me start by addressing the BDS point, because that hasn't been mentioned yet. There was a ballot, and we have the strongest anti-BDS law in the country. There's a ballot initiative just now to take it off, to repeal that. Just removed from the ballot just weeks ago. But it shows you that the pressure is there. And as governor, I will resist that. We have to fight that pressure. You've got cities now in California, was it Hayward, Richmond, passing these laws. They're illegal. I will make sure that as governor, my attorney general sues these cities to stop them breaking the law. Now, let's talk about the relationship. I've mentioned it a couple of times. The reason I was in Israel with Shimon Peres when he was foreign minister, he asked me to come out and speak to him when I wrote my first book, Good Business. The theme of that book was business as a force for good. People working together in an institution that we call a company, side by side, to make a contribution to society. That's the vision that he had at the Peres Center for Peace. And that is why I think the way to deal with some of these terrible problems that we've been talking about, the hate and the mistrust and the division, is to increase our partnership, to increase especially business relationships with Israel, because that foundation of prosperity and cooperation is how we build a stronger future for Israel and for us here in California.
So as I think all of my colleagues have said, you don't have to agree with the government of Israel to be able to say strongly and clearly that Israel has a right to exist, to defend itself, to be proud of its history, of its culture, of its people. There's another form of misassociation, though, that I want to point out, which is how wrong it is that Jewish children, including right here in our own state, on our own public university campuses, are harassed and discriminated against for being Jewish because of some association with the government halfway around the world that they may strongly disagree with. Why is that? There is something about anti-Semitism in our society that is so deep, so wrong. You don't see, at least I'm not aware of as mayor, people being mad at Narendra Modi and then picking on Indian children. There's something very pervasive here, which is why we have to have that anti-Semitism prevention coordinator, laws like AB 715, and specific focus on the nature of anti-Semitism in our society and combat it very vocally, very directly. On the relationship with Israel, it's an important one for our country and for our state, as you all know. And in Silicon Valley, I have lost count of how many brilliant entrepreneurs, investors I've met from Israel who have brought incredible innovation to our state. And that exchange is something we need to continue to invest in.
We're going to take a brief pause here because I will note, with the exception here of Mr. Hilton, which is the only reason I'm not going to call on you to do this, but for our remaining 4 candidates, because there was the specific question about your response to pressure to sever that partnership. We'd like to hear very briefly, and I do mean briefly, I'm not even going to set a clock, I will rely upon your good conscience, and Mayor, let's start with you. Your response to the BDS movement in 10 seconds or less.
I strongly reject it, and we should push against any attempt to unwind our prohibition of it.
Mr. Steyer, and we'll just go down the line here for clarification. Mr. Steyer.
I've moved past any idea of divestment being a move that's representative in our state, and in this case, I'm opposed to it as well.
As I said, I've been in the arena for 14 years, and I actually have a record of co-sponsoring the anti-BDS legislation in Congress, and nothing will change.
I already stated my position against BDS. I've been jammed a lot. when the Qassam rockets were coming on Sderot, and I stood up with Elie Moyal in Sderot. My kids couldn't come because the IDF said it was too dangerous. When I came back, I visited a mosque, and I let them challenge me for why I went to Israel. I have been in this town criticized, I've been pressured, and I've not relented or bent in any way, and I never will.
Thank you. All right, so for everyone keeping score, we will return once again, starting with you, Representative Swalwell, and this time we will have 60 seconds on the clock for your response to the following. Democracy is essential for all communities in this nation, and yet according to a recent poll from the Public Policy Institute of California, satisfaction with democracy at the state level stands at a record low of 33%. As governor, how would you aim to avoid the pitfalls of polarization to ensure civility, foster collaboration, and work towards a more unified California?
My default is always going to be collaboration. And that will be my position with the President of the United States. I will seek, on behalf of Californians, to collaborate. But I'm not naive. I was raised by a cop. I learned very early how to stand up to bullies. And the greatest threat to democracy is the guy that I worked on impeaching twice. He's in the White House. And we are fooling ourselves if we think that we can make nice with this guy. I will always seek to collaborate and get a win. But I am not going to let the most vulnerable people in our state run through the fields and factories where they work, women being dragged by their hair and put in unmarked vans, public executions happening in our streets. If the president wants to go after any of those vulnerable communities, he knows, because I've stood up to him for the last 10 years, he has to go through me.
Who better to stand up to Donald Trump than somebody who came out of the civil rights movement, a labor leader for my entire life? But those of you in LA know, the Jewish Journal, while I was mayor, called me the first Jewish mayor. Go back and look. At Cecil Murray's first AME, they called me the second black mayor. If there was one thing about me, I was a uniter. I work with Republicans and I work with Democrats. I'll work with him if he wants to work with us, but I will stand up to him. When I was Speaker of the Assembly, I balanced two budgets with a Republican, with a surplus, by the way, with a Republican and a Democratic governor when we had 42 and 48 votes. I know how to work with the other side. We have to become more bipartisan. Maybe not with him, because he's not interested, but with the rest of them. I can work with both sides. We've got to teach our children that civil war is not an option.
So I think the reason that there's this collapsing faith in democracy is because people keep voting and voting and voting and nothing ever changes. Nothing gets better. You look at California, young people in California, the expectation that you can have a better life than your parents, that you can start and raise a family here, you can afford to own your own home, completely gone. That's where the disillusionment is coming from. The fact that everything's so expensive, everything's so difficult, running a business, running a restaurant like I used to run, it's all so difficult. And election after election, nothing seems to get better. That's why people have lost faith in democracy. That's why I think here in California, it is time for an outsider to come and shake up this system that is obviously not working. People look at our system and they think it's corrupt. They can see that it's failing. They want change. And that is the best way that we can restore faith in democracy, to elect someone who's actually going to change things and deliver results. And that is me.
Look, the bottom line is it's not either or. We need a governor, and I will be a governor, who fights for our values, who stands up to President Trump, who uses the law, who uses the bully pulpit, who persuades to win elections, and make sure that we defend our most vulnerable people, just as I've done as mayor of the largest city in Northern California. But Steve is also right, that democracy is eroded when we keep asking you for more and we don't deliver better. And ultimately, as Mayor Villaraigosa said, we have to work across the ideological spectrum to solve problems. That is why you elect us, to use your hard-earned tax dollars and the power of the state to make your lives better, to make you safer, to make you more secure in your lives, to create economic opportunity, better schools, more affordable housing and energy. That's what I'm going to be focused on, because the best resistance is delivering results with our California values.
Okay, you guys should know I'm the outlier. I'm from affordability. My whole campaign is making California affordable for Californians. I'm the person here who's with working people every step of the way, and I just got the Union of Domestic Workers to endorse me this morning. But if you think this is an equivalent situation, I would beg to differ extremely strongly. The president wants to take over federal elections. He's a crook. He's a crook. He's always been a crook. I got 8 million signatures to impeach him in 2017 and 2018. And the idea that somehow, we're not getting along. I don't get along with crooks. I don't get along with people who shoot people in the face in Minnesota. So, no. Sorry. Do I think he's coming for California? Heck yes, I think he's coming for California. And I don't think there's any reason for us to sit here and think we're going to get along, because we're not going to get along. He is coming for our money. He's coming for the people here who he can go after. And he's coming with people with assault rifles and masks. And that's where we're going, and we're going to have to be coordinated and stand up for ourselves and put together that coalition to show we stand for decency and democracy and liberty.
For our next question, 60 seconds each, beginning with Mr. Villaraigosa. Inflation, wildfires, budget cuts, a growing mental health crisis, all of these things have become a perfect storm, hitting many families hard. Surveys show that 33% of Jewish Angelenos now say that they're struggling financially. That's up from 19% in 2021. As governor, what specific and bold steps would you take in your very first year to ease the cost of living crisis and protect families from rising financial pressures?
That's why I'm running. I'm the only one on this stage that's ever done a job like this. I was mayor of a city that's bigger than San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, and San Diego. A city with more poverty comparable to Fresno, one of the highest poverty cities in the United States of America. What am I going to do? We've got to address the fact that we have the highest gas prices. We overregulate refineries. We made it impossible for them to exist. And if one more closes down, gas prices are going to $8.75 a gallon. Utility costs have gone up 60% in the last 6 years, the second highest utility cost in the United States of America. Our kids can't afford to buy a home without our help. It used to be that homeownership was part of the American dream, and now for our kids, it's 3 roommates in a crowded apartment. The next governor's got to build market rate, affordable workforce, homeless housing. We've got to build again. I was Gavin's, the governor's infrastructure czar. I have a record of building, and I will do that as governor.
So Antonio's right about the problem. But who does he think caused the problem? We've had 16 years of one-party rule in this state from these Democrats. I mean, there's no one else to blame for the fact that we have the highest cost of living in the country, the highest gas prices, the highest electric bills, highest housing costs. We've got to go in a new direction. We've got to end the extremism on climate change that means that we're now importing 80% of our oil, even though we have abundant reserves right here in California. That's the quickest way we can get gas prices down, and that's my pledge. $3 gas instead of $5, $6, $7, or $8 gas, which is where we're heading. And we've got to cut the bloat and fraud and waste in our government so we can cut taxes. Your first 100 grand, tax-free. That's my promise to working class Californians who've been hurt the most by these policies that we've seen. And above all, to restore that California dream of a home you can afford to buy by getting rid of the insane regulations that make it so expensive to build anything in our state.
I'm a proud Democrat because I grew up in a working class community, and the only reason we had health insurance that allowed us to keep our home when I had lung collapses and had to spend a lot of time in the hospital was my dad's health insurance because of his union job. This is a party that at its best at its best, has looked out for working people and created great public systems and services and infrastructure that lifts people up. At the same time, though, I'm a different kind of Democrat because I've been watching what's been going on over the years, and we have to acknowledge that in a state that has the highest tax burden, the highest regulatory burden, that we've made everything too expensive and too hard to do. It should not cost twice as much in California to build a home as it does in Colorado, the exact same home. That's a public policy failure, and we will take the cost out of our building codes, out of our fees, out of our regulations for housing, for energy. In the meantime, we're going to improve our public schools for more opportunity for our kids. Thank you.
So my campaign is all about affordability. It's about because Californians can't afford to live here. So 60 seconds is pretty quick to talk about that because it's a multivariate problem. Housing, I always say, there's no silver bullet, it's silver buckshot. We need different permitting. Okay, I pushed for that last year and it passed. We need different zoning. I pushed for that last year and it passed. We are going to have to reduce the unwanted, the desire of cities and counties not to have new housing because they can't afford to pay for the education and healthcare of the people in the houses. That's why I'm pushing to close this tax loophole. We need new technology in housing that exists that let us drop the price per square foot by 36%. California is the leader in technology. Let's embrace technology. But it's so broad. It's not just housing. I'm going after the electric monopolies to reduce the cost by half or by a quarter. I'm going to go after the healthcare. That's why I'm for single payer. That's the only way we drop healthcare. In every one of these, you got to know the facts, you got to be detailed, and you got to go after the root causes.
The average age of a first-time homebuyer in California is 40 years old. We have over 400,000 regulations on the books. California is a blue state held down by red tape. Here's what I'm going to do. Day one, I'm declaring a housing emergency, and with the emergency powers of the Office of Governor, I'm going to put the shot clock that I'm looking at right now, 90 days on every agency that approves or denies housing. 90 days to surge more supply into our state, to get rid of the uncertainty and the high litigation costs that go along with approving these projects. I did that as a planning commissioner and a city council member in my hometown of Dublin. And the California promise has to be this, that you can take your first job, have your first kid, and God forbid, buy your first house in the same decade.
From a number of firsts to our last question, for which I will ask our timekeepers to put 45 seconds on the clock. I know that is a brief amount of time to answer a big question, but we are going to keep the train running along the track. Mr. Hilton, we will start with you. California has seen a 9% drop in homelessness across the state, but some fear that there are way too many factors which may destabilize this downward trajectory. What is the single most important policy you would introduce or action you would take to address this issue?
Thank you. It's a combination. I'm going to go with two. We have to enforce the law. It's illegal to live on the street. All the homeless encampments we see are illegal. They've always been illegal. We have to enforce the law and remove people from that situation. We would never tolerate someone we love living in those conditions. We have to act strongly. But then we have to make sure that people get the treatment that they need for their addiction, if that's causing the problem, or mental health. That means we need to absolutely enforce and apply Prop 36 that this state voted for by 70%, and the governor refuses to fund. The next governor has to honor that vote and make sure that we get our people the mental health treatment that they need.
California has over 100,000 people living outside. It's a public policy failure. It's not ethical or fiscally responsible to lock them all up. Let me tell you what we're doing in San Jose that has led the way for the state of California. As mayor, over the last 4 years, we've reduced the number of people living outside by nearly 1/3 by being more pragmatic. We have built basic, dignified shelter. We've partnered with our county to expand inpatient treatment, and when it is available, we hold people accountable for coming indoors to get the help that they need. That is the formula. As governor, I will create a fair share framework to hold every city and every county accountable for doing its part to bring every single person indoors.
So only 1 in 7 people who are on the street start out with some serious mental health problem, bipolar or substance abuse. But being on the street is so destructive, so scary, so stressful that it produces mental health problems for virtually everybody. So the biggest thing we can do about homelessness is to keep people off the street in the first place and get them off the street as fast as possible, because being on the street is its own problem. And the idea that we're going to get people into permanent housing, which takes 7 years and costs $750 grand a key, isn't going to work. It's not working. Emergency interim housing. I know that the mayor actually absolutely supports this. Get people off the street. The fastest growing population of people going onto the street is over 65. We need to keep people off the street and then get them off the street.
On homelessness, it's not a resource challenge. It's a policy challenge. And I say this as a family member of somebody who was homeless for years. And anyone who is related to somebody with severe mental illness or severe addiction will tell you that all of the rights are in the favor of the person who has no ability to take care of themselves, and none of the rights are on the favor of the family member, the friend, and the community that has the resources. I want to work and will work with the legislature to change that rights equation, because what Tom said is right. When only 1 out of 7 are severely mentally ill or addicted, we can work to take care of the other 6 out of 7, but all of the resources, police, fire, are going to those 1 out of 7 individuals. If we address that rights equation, we can help the veteran, the single mom. But until we do that, it's a policy change. We're not going to make a difference.
The number one thing I'll do is stop throwing money at things that don't work. The legislative analyst said we spent $24 billion at the state. They did an audit, and they couldn't prove what worked or what didn't. I think 2 programs worked: rental assistance and home safe. So folks, I don't believe in criminalizing the homeless. I do believe in compassion, but I don't believe in chaos. When I was mayor, I built more permanent supportive housing for the homeless than the 12 years before me. We had a fraction of what we have today. The next governor is going to have to double down on what works and stop throwing money at what doesn't. We need locked mental institutions. We can't keep on complaining that Ronald Reagan closed them, and we've been in office for 28 years and we haven't opened them. We need to double down on what works.
There will be no timer for our last item tonight. We will not have closing arguments. Instead, we are looking to finally hear from each of you, and we'll begin with you, Mayor Mahan, to see how you do being nimble on your feet and reveal the essence of who you are. So it is a fill in the blank, and each of you have 1 word and 1 word only to respond.
Wait, I can't.
Lucky me.
Here's the sentence. As governor of California, I promise to be blank. And to buy you a few more seconds, as governor of California, I promise to be what?
Accountable.
Service.
Bold.
Problem solver.
Transformational.
And with that, we are unfortunately out of time this evening, but I do want to thank first and foremost the candidates on this stage with me. In just 1 moment, yes, we're very close. Before we go, ladies and gentlemen, please stay in your seats for a moment. We promise we'll be leaving shortly, but gentlemen, I'll ask you to take your seats as well, because there is a bigger message here, and that message is that this is a critical election year. And as you all know, informed civic engagement is crucial. We encourage you to make your voice heard at the ballot box. If you don't know already, the primary election will take place on June 2nd. The general election will take place November 3rd. You can register to vote and check your registration status at registertovote.ca.gov. If you would like to share tonight's forums with others, we really encourage you to do so. It will be available on the YouTube channels of Jewish Federation Los Angeles, JCRC Bay Area, and Jewish California, formerly known as JPAC. And now, to close out tonight's program, I'd like to call to the stage here with us our final guest. Please welcome Laura Lauder, Board Chair of the Executive Committee at Jewish Federation Bay Area.
How fortunate are we? We are a Jewish community here in California with 5 extraordinary allies. Thank God for all of you for being with us. Thank you for protecting us, for fighting for our kids, for supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship, for being a partner. So I want to say thank you to all of you, and to you, Alex Cohen. You did a fantastic job. Let's hear it for our great candidates. Thank you.